Hey there, this is Perch. Going into religion and comics, and this time from a different perspective. I did a live stream quite a long time ago with Larry King about. Every time I say it, I first picture Larry King, the aged, horny news anchor. It's 100% different from the Larry King the nice Larry King, good guy Larry King on Twitter. Anyway, religion and comics. In that stream, we talked about religion in comics, but here is kind of a different answer to the question of like why aren't there comics kind of really geared toward, let's say very conservative or religious people? Why isn't that market kind of tapped? And it was interesting because a couple times now we've heard some editors and some people at the Big Two, David Gabriel, and a couple others say, yeah, that they recognize that's a market. That's a market that they're not really playing in. And so it begs the question, why? Well, why not? Now, first, I want to clarify when I say conservative or religious, well, religious makes sense, but conservative, I'm not talking about Republican. I'm not talking about Trump comics. I'm talking about um, conservative, more conservative values, not getting into the politics, not getting into abortion or anything, just comics that are written for more of a conservative perspective or a religious perspective, where the characters have faith or they deal with kind of faith-based crises, but not as like propaganda. Okay, so not there have been those comics. You go back in time, there have been some attempts to do religious comics that are really propaganda for different causes, and that's fine. That's a different topic altogether. And but it's interesting because there's a what can we say? Well, there's a big portion of the country that is religious or that at least wants content in that vein. There is a hearty conservative base out there. We have a president in part because of it. So why not go after that market? And I think the reason is kind of twofold. One's a yeah, well, you could argue with it. The other is more practical. The more practical side is simply how. How would you go after it? Because right now the distribution arm of comics is really, really struggling. It's limited in how they get comics to the shelves. You've got the direct market, you have attempts with Walmart and other things, but it's not like you have this wide distribution for comics. And it's also because you don't have wide distribution of comics, you don't have a good wide marketing message either. It's not like how do you if you make a comic, let's say you make a kind of faith-based superhero group and you're going to put it out there. Okay, day one, how are you going to get visibility of this comic? Where are you going to go? You're not going to call every church. That would make no sense. You can go after the Christian bookstores and those kinds of locations, but that's just not a big market. There's not a lot of people shopping in those areas. So it's a case of you have a really big conservative religious market, but you don't have an easy vehicle to get to them, to basically get your message to them without spending a lot of money. I mean, you can run ads on Fox News, but even there, it's a misnomer to say all religious people watch Fox News. It's a cross section, sure, but it's not a perfect one by any stretch of the imagination. So how do you put one and one together to make two? How do you accomplish this? I think that's a real problem. And so when you hear a David Gabriel or some of the editors, some of the people in at Marvel or DC or any publisher, that's kind of the dilemma that they're facing. They don't know if they produce these comics, how would they go to market with them, and in a big way, in a way that's going to build the numbers. Now you might say, well, wait a minute, why don't they just put it out into the direct market like anything else? Well, they can, but it's guaranteed. So when Marvel puts out Unstoppable Wasp or Moon Girl or whatever, when they put out those titles, um, in their heads they're using this math. They're saying, Raina Telgemeier, Dab Pilkey, these other people, they're serving this market. We know the audience is out there. We know that we can get to them. We know that we're going to bundle these comics for trades and get them to Scholastic and get them out. But we're going to produce them in our normal way so as to be cost conscious and efficient. And we'll put them out to the direct market. We don't expect high numbers there, but we do expect the collections to have a second life through Scholastic and other things. So they basically can do the math to where they're profitable. If you've got a Christian based or faith based book, they don't have the math worked out. They don't have the all right, we'll put this into the direct market. We know it won't sell that well because it's not the great cross section of the audience. So we are doing this so it can have a second life, but where? It's not going to go to Scholastic. It's just unclear. So they've got a muddled path to success. And when you're a comic company and you're producing, even Marvel, you're producing 80, 100 comics, whatever you're doing a month, um, it's still it's still hard to figure out where to fit that in. And anything that is at all abnormal is tough, even when you're sure the market's going to be there. I mean, so if I was at Marvel working and I said, hey, we want to go after this Dav Pilkey market, I would try and replicate, like, okay, we're going to put out a bigger book. It's going to have 120 pages. We're not going to mess with individual chapters. We're going to make it a different form factor, smaller, fitting the hands of the kids. We're going to, completely go that route. But I would be creating an abnormal product. I'd be creating something with a different print size, different distribution model, all the rest. And that's hard for a company to contemplate. It creates friction in their business. And they're running, they're not running like tossing money out everywhere. They're trying to run as a profitable business. They've got internal politics to navigate with Disney, who are producing those kinds of books just through a completely different publishing arm. And it's complicated. So if it's complicated, even if you have a really clear idea, hey, let's take the Hulk, let's put him in kind of wacky adventures aimed at, the 5 to 10, 12 market. Let's have the art illustration match it. It's a guaranteed seller. The Hulk is known. Kids like dressing up like the Hulk. The Hulk is a favorite. Let's put this book out for the kids, even though I can very easily, I can put together that PowerPoint presentation showing how this would make money. Because it's different, it's hard. It's hard to get justified. It runs into a lot of obstacles. Sometimes it makes it, usually it doesn't. So with Christian religious-based books, it's that much harder. You don't have a clear path to financial success. And that's the challenge that they have to overcome. If you were a new publisher starting out, you'd at least be starting on the right footing because that's your business model going forward. But you still got to answer those questions. How are you going to attract your audience? And people actually struggle. Forget about comics. The whole Christian religious market as a vertical, as a business group, is hard for people to sell to. It always has been. It's an area where it's not, you don't have a gift shop in the church, and you do, but you do have a network of people who are religious who will talk to each other and share information. But it's been really hard to tap into that market. And I actually do feel, in terms of the big business ideas over the next 5 years, I think that some bubble, some social network may emerge that will allow you to create kind of defined walled groups, if you will. Similar to Facebook groups, you have private groups. We already have a lot of these things, but basically a way to make walled groups that you can define, you can set, and then you can go off. It has to be a fairly altruistic social network because it's going to be, by its definition, capping its scale by putting a wall around things. So it's not going to grow at the same limit. Probably a little tougher to get VC funding for something like that. But anyway, that's the kind of stuff that needs to, if there is a robust kind of religious group that can get started, I think it would make a ton of money because there is this untapped audience out there that's looking to connect and consume things, but the products aren't finding them and they're not finding the products. So it's a mess. The second reason, I took a long time with that one. This will be way quicker. The second reason that religious comics struggle is simply that a lot of the people involved, the creative people involved, the writers, the artists, the people who go for, writing and drawing comics, tend to be, not always, not even close to always, but they tend to be less religious. This is just a, generality. Exceptions prove the rule, and there's some big exceptions out there. I mean, Priest is obviously very religious, and then there are lots of people who are religious in comics, but not nearly as many. And in fact, if anything, there's probably more of a skew to atheism or agnostic kind of people in the industry who would struggle, would take offense, or not want to be involved in a project that was religious in nature because that's kind of just inherent to the creative community in general. Don't know why. It's just for whatever reason. You go to an art school or any kind of creative kind of education institute, and you will find that most of the people there are atheist, agnostic, and in many cases actually, skew negative to religion. I don't want to get into a whole thing about kind of myself personally, but my view has always been this. I think first of all, I think faith is a private matter. It's yours, and you can do with it what you want, and that's up to you, and you are the guide of your own mind, body, soul, whatever it happens to be. Um, I look at, a lot of people are quick to point out the scandals of the churches and the other problems. I am quick to kind of respond to, scandals are scandals. If there's something illegal going on, if there's, the problems with the Catholic Church, what have you, I mean, it's a criminal matter. It's actually not a matter of opinion. If this stuff's going on, it's a criminal matter. It needs to be dealt with and needs to be, charged and prosecuted aggressively, really aggressively. I don't think that's, I don't think that's tied to religion. It doesn't have to be. If the church or senior members of the church are hiding this or covering it up, as has been the kind of the evidence that's been put out there, that's terrible. And those people should also be in jail. I mean, honest, flatly, they should be in jail. There's no excuse for it. And I think, you go high enough up the church, you got to keep arresting people and shutting that stuff down. But outside of that ugliness, and no doubt about it, it's ugly. I live in an area where there's a lot of homeless, and there's a lot of needy projects. There are a lot of people who need things. There's unwed mothers. There's junkies. There's just pure homeless people. There's people who are down on their luck. People who are starving, and there's disaster aid at various times. And almost every time, who are the people who are opening up their doors and letting people sleep in the building? Who's figuring out how to give aid, and shelter, and clothes and food? It's the churches. The churches are often the first to step up to help in disasters. And I think it's easy for a lot of people to stand on the sidelines and rip on the churches and say, "Oh yeah, people are stupid for being religious," but then they don't pony up the cash, time, or effort when it comes time to help fellow man. Those the social programs are severely underfunded by people. That's why the government wants so much tax dollars and other things to fuel those social programs, because people aren't typically doing it. But the people who are tend to be the religious church people. That's how it works. So I think you got to give some real credit to that. You have to acknowledge that fact that there is good being done. Myself personally, I'm not a very religious person. I admit it, but I have a very big respect for the good that the church does. And I think if people are religious, it's never bothered me. I've never sat in a room and thought to myself, God, listen to this person prattling on about God. I've never done that. And maybe it's simply because, what religious leanings I do have tend to be more Eastern, just for a variety of reasons, tend to be more Buddhist kind of in nature, I would guess. I guess I could say. I don't think that fits it well, but part of this isn't really a religion. Part of the social teachings of some of these Eastern philosophies is, your business is your business, and other people's business is their business. And when people do good, you should praise, you should be thankful, and you should acknowledge it. And that's how I feel. Sorry, I took the conversation a random direction there, but I think that may help explain kind of my point of view of all this, which is, I think religion and conservative values, there's a big audience there, and that audience is not being served with comics, and they should be. And I think there's a market there. There's a way for people to make money. That's good. There's also just a desire for people to want to read content, and I think that's good too. So we should make sure that they have things to read and figure that out. And I think it does come down to connecting to that market, though, at the end. That's really where it all boils down. Anyway, there you go. I hope that answered the question. If you had it, why? What do you think? Do you agree, disagree? Would love to hear your thoughts on this. I really actually would love to. I would love somebody to come on and leave a comment, send me a mail, and say, I'm completely wrong. There's a direct way to market to this audience, and here's how you do it. Man, if you've got that idea in your head, you're going to make $1 million. So reach out in touch with me. We are going to start a business together, because there's a huge untapped market, and a lot of companies really struggle with how to reach out to it. So let's figure it out. Like, subscribe, notify, tell a friend, all that stuff. Follow me on Twitter, Comic Perch. Thank you for listening.